white supremacists, and the Ku Klux Klan, so emboldened by a president then in the White House that they saw as an ally. They didn't even bother to wear their hoods. Hate was on the march in America. Old ghosts in new garments.
Old ghosts in new garments. I think we're seeing those old ghosts in new garments even as we speak, Joe Biden. Have you seen the new garments? I think are the keffiyehs. And they tried to use that old debunked hoax again about very fine people on both sides. They claim that Donald Trump was defending the white supremacists. Oh my gosh. They gaslight you. They try to make you believe things that aren't true.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Well. We've got a lot to discuss today and some real treats for you here on the Michele Tafoya podcast, including a clip from Phil Donahue died in the last couple of days, and he was a television icon, married to Marlo Thomas, and he had a guest on long ago whose words could not be more powerful than they are right now. That's the treat I'm going to entice you with. That'll be the last thing we cover today. You just got to hear it. You just got to hear it. I'm telling you, it's worth waiting for. In the meantime, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Like us, do whatever. I don't usually start my podcast asking for that, but I'm gonna because I'm told that's what I'm supposed to do. So there you go. Lots to talk about. President Biden is no longer relevant. Okay? Let's just say it like that. President Biden is no longer relevant. He was pushed not only out of the election, out of his campaign, he was pushed so late in day one of this DNC, Democrat National Convention, that very few people actually saw it. I mean, first they put him on opening day, which is the worst day. And then they push him past midnight Eastern time. And they try to tell us, oh, it's because there was so much applause during other speeches. Really? It was, we're going to play you some clips and we're going to talk about that. But honestly, don't bother impeaching him. He's no longer relevant. The battle is now between the Democrat candidate and the Republican candidate. It's Kamala Harris and Tim Walz versus Trump and JD Vance, period. So, whatever. I know. And I'm one of those that says accountability. So if, in fact, Joe Biden broke laws and endangered our foreign policy, our domestic policy, and you want to go after him for that, go. I believe in accountability no matter where it happens or when. I still think Hillary Clinton is walking freely without any shame or accountability for all of the sins she committed when she was Secretary of State and so forth. So we'll get to all of that. Also, you know what? There are Republicans who are not worth their salt either. George Santos is one of them. We're going to talk about him and his presser after pleading guilty yesterday. We're going to talk about that. And then Tim Walz. I live in Minnesota. I've seen what Tim Walz is all about. So those of you who are first now just getting to know him and learning about him, you will want to understand that he has some very tricky parts of his background. One of them involves China and the CCP, not just, hey, let's go see the Great Wall of China and come home, but maybe a relationship with the Chinese Communist Party and the things that he taught his high school kids in Nebraska and trips that he went on. This is very scary and should be very, very concerning to every voter. I know he looks like a nice guy, doesn't he? This man is dangerous and he's a fraud. And I will say it every day if I have to, because I've lived in this state and seen what he's capable of. So we'll get into that as well. First, I want to thank Priority Gold for sponsoring the show. You know, economists are warning that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. And boy, is this election going to matter with inflation still on the rise. I know you hear that inflation is coming down, but basically what that means is you're still gaining weight. You're just gaining it a little more slowly, but you're still getting bigger and bigger. So inflation's on the rise. Global uncertainty is still looming. It's clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't had your eye on gold, time to make it a priority. I urge you to call my friends at Priority Gold to find out how they can help you diversify your savings with physical gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit prioritygold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree. Physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings, no matter the economic climate. So act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit prioritygold.com/golden to learn more. 1-800-405-GOLD or visit prioritygold.com/golden to learn more. So Joe Biden says democracy was saved by putting Kamala Harris by nominating her, basically, by handing her the nomination for the Democrat Party for president. Handed it to her. He says, I'm not mad. No one pushed me. I made this decision. All evidence to the contrary. And it was so weird. If you watch the DNC, seeing Nancy Pelosi on the floor of the convention center holding a sign that said, I love Joe. And she looked so weird. Just like, I love Joe. I love Joe. Yeah, I didn't stab him in the back. I really didn't. You know, this is not the way democracy is supposed to work. Because, see, Joe Biden got the nomination the way that democracy is supposed to work. And then things went sour and south real fast. And so they gave him the boot. They gave him the boot. First, they tried to tell us he was sharp as a tack and ran circles around everyone in the administration. Then we saw what we knew we were seeing all along, which was just amplified by his debate performance. And then they all said, oh, no, it was just a bad night. And then they saw the polls just sinking. And so they switched gears, just like that. Handed the nomination to a woman who has not given a press conference, has not given an interview since, and her website has no policies listed. One of her campaign people said, well, we're not going to list policy until after she's elected. Huh? I mean, it's crazy. You have to we have to pass the bill so we can find out what is in it, is basically what we're saying here. Oh, my heavens. Anyway, back to Biden, because after last night, he is now irrelevant. He's vacationing in California. And you can say it was sad and you can say all the things about it, but it just demonstrates how they can say they love Joe, but the way they treated him and the way they treated him last night, in spite of the chants of "We love Joe" and comparing him to George Washington. A quick history lesson, folks, why this George Washington claim is so stupid. There is no parallel here. See, everyone wanted George Washington to remain president, but he knew he didn't want to be a king and he didn't want this country to have kings. And so he said, we've got to show that leadership can pass to the next generation of leaders. And he stepped down voluntarily. Now, everyone's trying to say Joe stepped down voluntarily, that it was his decision. Yeah, whatever. And then they go, well, we are where we are, so let's just move on. They want you to just keep moving on and not look at what really happened here. So this is in no way a parallel to George Washington. They're starting to call him now the most consequential Democratic president in history. I'm sorry. I guess. How do you define consequential? The consequences have been dire. I'll agree with that. It has been a terrible administration. And in that regard, it's been incredibly consequential. But he should be on the Mount Rushmore of Democrat presidents? Really? Whew. This is a group of people at the DNC and the Democrat machine as a whole trying to, again, gaslight you into thinking that you're seeing the greatest president in the history of the country step aside for the benefit of the United States to bring in a socialist or communist or Marxist candidate and her little sidekick, Tim Walz, who's also a socialist, communist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, to run the country further into the ground. That's how much they love America. Okay, without further ado, let's hear our first bit of Joe Biden from last night. This is in his speech. And as he does in many speeches, including his most recent State of the Union, he likes to yell at you, to all the listeners. I think he thinks it's exuding strength and passion. It's not. It just feels like you're getting yelled at. So let's play our first clip from Joe Biden on the Monday night of the DNC 2024.
I ran for president in 2020 because of what I saw in Charlottesville in August of 2017. Extremists coming out of the woods, carrying torches, their veins bulging from their necks, carrying Nazi swastikas, and chanting the same exact anti-Semitic bile that was heard in Germany in the early 30s.
And that we're hearing on campuses now, Joe.
Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and the Ku Klux Klan, so emboldened by a president then in the White House that they saw as an ally. They didn't even bother to wear their hoods. Hate was on the march in America. Old ghosts in new garments.
Old ghosts in new garments. I think we're seeing those old ghosts in new garments even as we speak, Joe Biden. Have you seen the new garments? I think are the keffiyehs that the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas demonstrators are wearing in Chicago today, including a Minnesota delegate to the DNC, who I saw wearing a keffiyeh. Okay, their necks bulging, veins in their necks bulging, really? And they tried to use that old debunked hoax again about very fine people on both sides. They claim that Donald Trump was defending the white supremacists. Oh my gosh. I almost just don't even want to dignify it with an answer. I've watched that tape over and over and over again. And this is what really makes people crazy, I think, about the Democrat Party. They gaslight you. They try to make you believe things that aren't true. And you can hear it with your own ears and see it with your own eyes, but they will still tell you that it is otherwise. You're going to hear more of that from Biden in a second, but this is what goes on. And they live by this idea that if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. And I've seen otherwise bright people believe this crap. It's not true. And if there's anything we should be pursuing as the greatest country on earth with freedom of speech still, and let's hang on tight to that, see what's going on in Brazil and New Zealand and Australia and Great Britain and Ireland. Check that out and you'll see how it can happen anywhere. But we still have free speech. We got to stand up for truth. Men are not women. Women are not men. Okay? XX does not equal XY. All right? And no, he didn't say that white supremacists and white nationalists were very fine people. In fact, Trump singled them out, saying, those people notwithstanding, I'm not including those. He goes out of his way again and again to say that. So, but they want you to believe it, and they've got a bunch of lemmings who are willing to go along, with all due respect to lemmings. All right. Here's the next section of Joe Biden's speech I want you to hear. Go ahead, John Berg, and roll it.
Donald Trump says he will refuse to accept the election result if he loses again.
I haven't heard him say that.
Think
I haven't
about
heard
that.
Trump say that.
He means it. Think about that.
Think about that.
He's promising a bloodbath
He's promising a bloodbath.
if he loses, in his words.
Yep.
And that he'll be a dictator on day one, in his own words. By the way, this sucker means it. No, I'm not joking. Think about it.
I'm not joking. Think about it. No, I'm not joking. Seriously, I'm not joking. How many times? There's another phrase he uses too, but I'm not joking. I'm serious, folks. I'm serious. Bloodbath. Once again, And again, I am no Trump apologist, but let us recall what he used the term bloodbath in reference to. It was the auto industry. He was speaking in Detroit about the auto industry and how if the Democrats were elected, that there was going to be a bloodbath in the auto industry. It is a term that is meant to indicate that, what's going to hit the fan. It doesn't really mean that people are sitting there throwing feces at a fan. It's you know what I'm saying? It's a figure of speech. And in this case, it has to do with an industry, not human beings bleeding. All right. Can we freaking get that straight? This is what I'm talking about. The dishonesty, the gaslighting, the manipulating of words and phrases and video and pictures to say what they want to say, not what is real. Even as a sports journalist, I didn't do that crap. And sports isn't nearly as impactful or, life-altering, in some cases it can be, as politics and the ramifications of an election. I have not heard Donald Trump say he's not going to accept the results of the nomination or the election. And this dictator on day one, oh God, could we just stop? Could we just stop? I have friends who believe that that's what he said and what he meant. I fear it's because they're being told by legacy media that's what he said and that's what he meant. Oh, it honestly, it keeps me awake at night. What's going on in this country? Finally, way past everybody's bedtime, Joe's and everybody else's, he got to sort of the end of his speech. He was still kind of yelling, but here's the last clip I'll play for you from Joe Biden's farewell speech at the Democrat National Convention.
Like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return for the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. But I hope you know how grateful I am to all of you. I can honestly say, and I mean this from the bottom, give you my word as a Biden. I can honestly say I'm more optimistic about the future than I was when I was elected as a 29-year-old United States Senator. I mean it.
I mean it. I'm not kidding. I give you my word as a Biden. Yeah, that's worth a lot. Give you my word as a Biden. Think about that. What faith can we have in the Biden brand or name anymore? Too young to be a senator or too old to be president. So he acknowledges, I guess. Anyway, sadly, we have 3 more days of this, and it's very hard to watch. I will be in Nashville on Wednesday, commentating on the Tim Walz speech. And I can't wait. But we're going to talk about more about Tim Walz in a minute, but you don't understand who Tim Walz is. I don't care what Mina Kimes of ESPN says about his masculinity. And this is the kind of masculinity we should be celebrating. Not big, tough guy. No. She even compared him to the Kelsey brothers. Okay. Anyway, that's another story. We may get to that on Thursday. My little tiff with Mina Kimes. But coming up, we've got more here. Listen, I don't defend all Republicans. I never have. I will call out both sides when I see that they need to be called out. And so we're going to do that next. We're going to talk about George Santos. Volatility is a word we can use pretty easily right now. There's volatility from this election and our national debt just breaking $35 trillion for the first time. There's never been a better time than now to consider what is the best way to protect your savings. So many are concerned that if this election goes sideways, things are going to get even worse. The good news is there's something you can do now ahead of whatever future chaos might be coming. Wealth Protection Research has amazing partners that specialize in helping everyday Americans protect their retirement accounts like 401ks, IRAs, or TSPs using a loophole that allows them to convert into physical gold or silver tax and penalty free. That's the key phrase. Find out more when you text FREEDOM to 76626 right now. You can break free from your captive retirement account and enjoy the peace of mind knowing your retirement savings are now stored and in your control. If you're interested in protecting your retirement with gold and silver, you can get a free investment kit texting FREEDOM to 76626. FREEDOM to 76626. So I like what's called a self-scout now and then. And what that means in sports is, okay, we're going to scout the opponent, but what are we doing wrong? What can we improve at? What can we do better? That's a self-scout. You're looking at yourself and going, how do we assess where we are? Well, so I'm going to self-scout the Republican Party here for a moment and tell you about George Santos. And I'm going to read to you from this article. I think this comes from the New York Post. Lion ex-rep George Santos chokes up as he pleads guilty, admits to betraying constituents, and faces jail time. This was yesterday, Monday. He choked up as he admitted to, quote, betraying constituents, pleading guilty to corruption charges that could land him in prison for several years. This guy is 36 years old. Prison could be in his future. He copped a plea deal to 2 counts, committing wire fraud and aggravated identity theft, just 3 weeks before he was set to stand trial on nearly 24 charges for which he faced 20 years in prison. So copped a plea to 2 counts. And so that way he avoids all these other counts. Quote, I understand and fully accept responsibility for my actions, Santos said during a hearing in Central Islip Federal Court, his voice trembling. Rather than tell you all about it, we're going to show you a clip of George Santos saying what he did was wrong and he hopes to improve. Go ahead and roll this clip.
To my family, friends, and supporters, and the people of New York's 3rd Congressional District, I offer my deepest apology. I know that my actions have caused disappointment, frustration, and a loss of faith in me, and for that I'm truly sorry. As I move forward, I am committed to living a life that reflects the values I should have upheld all along. Truth and integrity. I know that rebuilding trust will take time and that my actions will always be a part of my history. However, I am determined to use this experience as a turning point in my life, one that will guide me to make better choices and to be an exemplary member of my community. Thank you.
Well, it would be nice to believe that he could turn from this. They say leopards never change their spots. We'll see. But this was a bad guy. And there are a lot of bad folks in politics. We have Bob Menendez on the other side of the aisle, who is supposedly talking to Biden right now about a pardon so that he can clear his slate and clean up his record. But this was a bad moment for the Republican Party. But I don't want to say this reflects on the entire Republican Party, just as Bob Menendez does not reflect on the entire Democrat Party. But you know, he says, I betrayed the trust of my constituents and supporters. I deeply regret my conduct. I'll do my best to make amends and learn from this. He's going to face a minimum of 2 years behind bars, a maximum of 20 years. He's going to be sentenced in February, and federal guidelines call for a sentence of between 6 to a little over 7 years in prison, but the judge is not bound by that recommendation. So George Santos, good riddance. I think, you know, he's obviously a very flawed human being. And I don't understand why people get into politics for the wrong reasons. I just don't get it. I understand there's a lure of power. There's a lure of money. There's a lure of all the things that Joe and Jill Biden are trying to squeeze out of this last few months of the presidency. Private planes, the Air Force One, trips to California on the taxpayers' dime, etc. They're going to squeeze every bit about that they can get before they go home to Delaware. because the prospect of just finishing up life in Delaware probably doesn't look that good to Jill right now, who really enjoyed being first lady. But George Santos, 36 years old, I hope he changes. I hope truth and integrity, he said. Why can't we just expect that from the human race? It's because it doesn't exist, folks. Everyone thinks we're all able to be honest and people of integrity. Clearly, that's not the case. Clearly, that's not true. Tell that to Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Tell that to anyone who's in it for the wrong reasons. I grew up in an America where everyone just kind of was living for the American dream and supporting everyone's pursuit of it. And it's not a perfect country, but we're trying to get there. But if we turn to Marxism, if we turn to erasing our past, if we turn to other things that this current ticket wants us to, I really am afraid. We're going to get into that now because Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz. Of all the people she could choose for her vice presidential candidate, she chose Tim Walz. She supposedly felt comfortable with him. Oh, and oh, by the way, he's not Jewish, like Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who probably would have been probably would have been a better choice. But right now, what the media is doing as well, not only for Kamala, but for Tim Walz, is they're hiding him from you. We're not going to let that happen. And I hope that there are some curious journalists out there who care enough about the future of this country to look into this man's record and not just compliment his kind of masculinity, his style of masculinity. The hell does that have to? It's policy, it's character, it's integrity, it's record. We're going to get into Tim Walz's record and as it relates to the CCP in a minute. And part of this comes from an article that I'm going to read to you. But first, I love the people at besthotgrill.com. They make the incredible Solaire infrared grills that heat up in just 3 minutes to searing heat and make the juiciest grilled food you will ever taste. You don't have to take my word for it. Try before you buy with the Solaire demo rental program. For only $47, you can use a Solaire infrared grill for 2 weekends and the week in between without a salesman breathing down your neck. Test its versatility with steak, chicken, fish, pork, veggies. I hear some people even grill pineapple. Try that, whatever you want. All the foods your family enjoys. Inspect Solaire's quality construction and experience firsthand, as I got to, Solaire's hot and fast performance. Oh my gosh, the char on this stuff is amazing. And at the end of the demo, just clean it up, put it in the box for a UPS pickup. Solaire makes it easy. Then you'll get a coupon for $47 off any new Solaire infrared grill. The Solaire demo rental program will convince you why Solaire is truly the last grill you will ever buy. You can move it with you for the rest of your life. Learn more about the demo program and these amazing USA-made grills at besthotgrill.com. There's a manufacturer who's still in America. Okay. Besthotgrill.com, besthotgrill.com, Solaire demo rental program at besthotgrill.com. So it's funny, the name Tim Walz, that last name Walz is spelled W-A-L-Z. Just a quick mention about walls as in W-A-L-S. They don't work, right? Walls don't work and they're racist. Walls are racist and they don't work. But they are all around the Democrat National Convention. So when your safety matters, when you care about whether or not you're getting harassed by pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters, suddenly walls aren't racist anymore, in their opinion, in the Democrats' opinion. And suddenly, I guess they work, which is strange. It's like I remember when Joe Biden built a wall around his Delaware compound. You know why? Because walls work. They work at deterring people from entering your property or the country. But now we'll get back to Tim Walz, W-A-L-Z. Sketchy background. I've talked a lot on the air lately about how he let Minnesota down in so many ways. Highest corporate tax rate, let Minneapolis burn for 3 days. I had friends coming to my door saying, "Do you have a fire extinguisher? Because my friend's business in Uptown is burning to the ground and they need help." So, like a little household fire extinguisher was going to help, but it's all they had access to. Tim Walz let that happen. Tim Walz shut down Minnesota in a way that didn't need to happen. And he denies all of it. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Think about that for a minute. For those of you that isn't a common phrase, when a wolf dresses up like a sheep so he can infiltrate the sheep and, do what he does to sheep, that's a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's Tim Walz. All right, here's the headline on Tim Walz. Walz praised Chinese communism as a system where everyone shares. As a social studies teacher, Walz tells students everyone in China gets stuff. They get to share. He extolled life under Chinese communism, telling his students that it is a system in which everyone shares and gets free food and housing. Quote, "It means that everyone is the same and everyone shares," Walz said during a lesson on Chinese communist system in November 1991. "The doctor and the construction worker make the same. The Chinese government and the place they work for provide housing and 14 kilograms or about 30 pounds of rice per month. They get food and housing." Walz's remarks were reported in a 1991 article in Nebraska's Alliance Times-Herald that focused on his work on student exchange programs in China. Here's where this gets interesting. At the time, Walz was teaching social studies at a Nebraska high school. The unearthed comments could add to concerns about the Democratic vice presidential candidate's relationship with China, where he traveled extensively for decades and which he says he doesn't see as an adversary. So he said everyone's the same. Tell that to the Uyghurs, Tim. The Chinese Uyghurs, the Chinese Muslim Uyghurs are not the same. They don't get treated the same. They're in concentration camps, re-education camps. They are forced into labor, forced into all kinds of awful things, and in many cases just killed. So they're not the same, Tim. They're not the same. How naive. Now, here's where we get to our friend Michael Sobolik. He's been on this podcast several times. He is a China expert and the author of Countering China's Great Game. He said Walz's comments to students were a, quote, shockingly naive description of the Chinese Communist Party's rule. You think? Quote, American students need to learn the horrific truths of communism and the horrors this dangerous ideology has wrought over the past century, said Sobolik. Governor Walz should clarify his comments and share his impression of communism in 2024. See, here's the problem. No one's asking him about it. They're not answering questions. Isn't that convenient? They're not answering any questions except what kind of ice cream do you like? Walz's rosy description of communism in China is similar to his recent controversial remark that, quote, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Think about that. It also reflects his long-standing ties to the country of China. The candidate, quote, always has been fascinated by communist China, according to a profile about him published in Nebraska's Star-Herald in 1994. As a child, he recalled seeing, quote, pictures of Mao Zedong hung in public places and carried in parades. And that fascinated him? Talk to people who lived through Mao Zedong's China. Oh my Lord. Walz first traveled to China on a year-long teaching fellowship in 1989, months after the Chinese Communist Party slaughtered thousands of pro-democracy activists and student protesters in Tiananmen Square. Despite the country's turmoil, Walz, a 25-year-old National Guardsman at the time, wrote in a letter to one of his former college professors that he was, quote, being treated like a king in China. In China, Walz said that he received a salary that was double the pay of Chinese teachers, was given a decorated apartment with a color TV, and had the only air-conditioned residence on campus. He said he was also thrown parties on his birthday and Christmas. Hold on. He just said everyone in China is treated the same. Everyone's the same. He wasn't the same. Is that because he's not Chinese? He's American? Were they trying to bribe him? Why was he accepting a salary double of that of a teacher in China? Why, Tim? Why? Would love to ask you, but you're not taking questions. No matter how long I live, I'll never be treated that well again, he told the Times-Herald after arriving home. They gave me more gifts than I could bring home. It was an excellent experience. A newspaper photo showed Walz posing with one of his gifts, a paper fan, inscribed with a poem by the widow of Communist Party Allied Revolutionary leader Sun Yat-sen. After returning to the United States in the early 1990s, Walz started leading trips to China for American high school students. This is where it gets important. With support from the Chinese government. The trips were, quote, arranged by a friend of Walz in China's Foreign Affairs Department. The Chinese government also provided some of the funding for the program. Walz and his wife, Gwen, held their wedding on the 5th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, with Gwen Walz saying her husband, quote, wanted to have a date he'll always remember. The Walzes spent their honeymoon in China. They also founded a travel company, Education Travel Adventures, Inc., which specialized in trips to China. Tim Walz maintained public ties to Chinese educational institutes until at least 2007, when he was elected to Congress. He was a visiting fellow at the Macau Polytechnic University until 2007, according to reports. Okay. I want to get to Gordon Chang, who knows a lot about China, and what he thinks of this relationship that Walz had with China, but more importantly, taking kids to China for these quote unquote educational trips. It's not just as easy as, okay, everyone, let's get your passports ready. It's not that simple. Let's hear Gordon Chang explain this.
This is an extremely serious matter because taking high school students to China for these trips would have had to be approved by the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. That's the part of the party that is in charge of subverting foreign governments. So this is obviously a very sensitive matter. And then when you add on to it that he may not have notified his superiors and finished all of the reporting requirements, that means that this is deeply, deeply suspicious.
Deeply, deeply suspicious by a guy that says one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness. This stuff matters because it speaks to his mindset, his worldview, his beliefs, and his view of America, which, if it's any way similar to the way he's been treating Minnesota for the last several years, he don't like America. There are so many examples I could give, and we'll get to them all over the course of the next few weeks, but wolf in sheep's clothing. I cannot recommend Tim Walz for any office. I tried like hell to support an opponent of his to try to get him out of the governor's mansion in Minnesota. It didn't work out. But it's interesting because the first time he ran for governor, I think he won with 54% of the vote. The second time, 52% of the vote. So the support for him went down. Unfortunately, we just didn't have a great candidate running against him. That was unfortunate. Tim Walz is unfortunate. And I will stand on the rooftops and scream it from the top of my lungs for as long as I have to, folks, because you need to know. You need to be aware. And they're just going to tell you there's a nice guy with the appropriate kind of masculinity. That's what they're going to tell you. Well, Tim Walz is just another reason that this upcoming election will be as volatile as it appears it's going to be. And add to that our national debt just breaking $35 trillion for the first time ever. There really has never been a better time than now to consider what is the best way to protect your savings. So there are so many people that are concerned that if this election goes sideways, things are going to get worse. I believe that. The good news is there is something you can do now ahead of whatever future chaos might be coming. Wealth Protection Research has amazing partners that specialize in helping everyday Americans protect their retirement accounts like 401ks, IRAs, or TSPs using a loophole that allows them to convert into physical gold or silver tax and penalty free. Tax and penalty free. Find out more when you text FREEDOM to 76626 right now. That's right. You can break free from your captive retirement account and enjoy your peace of mind knowing your retirement savings are now stored and in your control. If you are interested in protecting your retirement with gold and silver, you can get a free investment kit texting FREEDOM to 76626. That's FREEDOM to 76626. Just get that free investment kit. Finally, today I leave you with some dessert. And I mean that. Milton Friedman is one of the greatest economists who ever lived. And he appeared on Phil Donahue's show back in the day. Phil Donahue passed away in the last couple of days. Sad news. He was a television icon. But this interview from the Phil Donahue show is one of the most impactful, important television clips I've seen in a long, long time. And I want to share it with you. And I hope you'll take a couple of minutes here, watch, listen, however you're absorbing this podcast today. This is amazing. Go ahead and roll it.
Did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed? What is greed? Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests. The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade. If you want to know where the masses are worst off, it's exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear, that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by a free enterprise system.
But it seems to reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system.
And what does reward virtue? You think a communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue? Do they choose their appointees on the basis of the virtue of the people appointed or on the basis of their political clout? Is it really true that political self-interest is nobler somehow than economic self-interest? You know, I think you're taking a lot of things for granted. And just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us. Well, I don't even trust you to do that.
Maybe that's the chef's kiss of the whole thing. Phil Donahue, I don't even trust you to do that. It's brilliant. It still holds true. Try to argue with him, as Donahue did. Phil Donahue's sitting there saying, we don't reward virtue. Virtue is its own reward, folks. You are virtuous because you choose to be virtuous, because you can live with yourself a whole lot more easily if you are virtuous. It is a reward in and of itself. And some people believe you'll be rewarded in the next life if you are virtuous. Virtue only gets you so far, though, in the real world. It gets you far with a lot of things, a lot of people, but most of all yourself and your family. But it doesn't always pay the bills. And to suggest that, as Tim Walz has, that everyone be treated equally. Everyone be treated equally. No matter if they're a grave digger or a trash collector or some jobs are harder than others and are rewarded as such. And we make those decisions. People make those decisions based on what is valuable to us. What are we willing to barter for and trade for and pay for? because I think the things that I'm willing to do that for are going to be different than the things my next door neighbor is. I have a neighbor who really loves cars. So anyway, I think it's a gem. I miss that man's point of view on this earth. There are quite a few points of view I think we really could use. And very few of them are in Chicago at the moment. We will get a live report from Chicago. It won't be live because this is a podcast, but we will get a report from a man on the ground. Our rooftop pastor is going to join us on Thursday. You'll want to tune in for that. In the meantime, be brave and do good. Success does not come in a linear path. There will be valleys until, before the peaks. But just continue to be brave and do good, and we will see you next time.
Now it's summer. The winter is past. And with a grateful heart, I stand before you now on this August night to report that democracy has prevailed